My name is Rajiv, and I live just 2 lanes away from the Chundawat family in Burari, Delhi, and I still remember the way the morning light broke on July 1st, 2018, carrying with it not birdsong or peace, but a smell and silence that felt heavier than smoke. Because that was the day I walked into a nightmare, the kind you think only exists in dark stories. But this was no story, it was real. The Chundawat family were not strangers, they were good neighbors. People who spoke kindly, ran a grocery shop, invited us during weddings, celebrated festivals with lights and sweets, and nothing about them suggested what horror lay waiting inside their home. But sometimes the darkest secrets grow behind the most ordinary doors, and that is something I learned too late. That morning, when the shutters of their small shop stayed down, people became uneasy because they were always awake early, and when they did not open their store, the neighbors went to check. And I went too. And as we stepped inside their house, we saw something that froze our blood, something that still keeps me awake at night. 11 bodies, hanging together, tied with scarves and cords, their faces covered, their hands bound, their eyes closed, and the sight did not feel human. It felt ritualistic. It felt like some cruel ceremony had taken place, because 10 of them were hanging like roots from the ceiling, and one, the grandmother, was lying on the floor, lifeless, as if placed to watch over the others even in death. The air was heavy with incense, and the smell of something metallic, and the room was silent except for the whispers of those who had entered, and every step we took felt wrong, because it was like stepping into the heart of some ritual that was still alive, even though everyone in it was dead. We screamed, we cried, we shouted for the police, and when they came, they too looked shaken, because this was not an ordinary crime scene. This was something out of nightmare, with charts and notes on the walls, and diaries stacked on tables, describing steps, instructions, rules for some ritual of salvation, written carefully, almost obsessively, for years. The police began reading, and the words made the hairs on my arms rise, because the writing spoke of a presence, of a spirit guiding them, of instructions that said the family could achieve something greater, a union with the divine, if they followed the ritual of bad tapasya, hanging like the roots of a banyan tree, and it explained why their bodies were arranged exactly like that, tied, covered, suspended, waiting for salvation. The diaries revealed that it was Lalit, the younger son, who believed his dead father's spirit was speaking to him, guiding him, controlling him, and the family believed him completely, and for years they followed his words, treating them like commands from another world, writing them down with devotion, until that final night when the words demanded they all surrender together. I remember the whispers in the crowd outside, people saying they had seen the family behaving strangely in recent months, performing unusual rituals, covering their mouths when speaking, chanting at odd hours, but no one imagined it would end like this. No one thought belief could become so sharp that it would cut through an entire family. That night, according to the diaries, they believed they would not die. They believed the ritual would give them salvation, that they would return together, blessed, saved, eternal, and so they tied each other, blindfolded each other, gagged each other, trusting completely, and in that trust, they walked willingly into death. The police searched every corner of the house, and every corner seemed to breathe the same obsession, from the basement where wooden planks were stored for rituals, to the kitchen where notes about purity were kept, to the room where the grandmother lay, separate, as if she had been chosen to stay grounded while the others ascended, and the evidence was chilling, because it was not murder by an outsider, it was murder by belief, murder by ritual, murder by something we could not see but which lived inside their minds. The street outside filled with wailing, relatives running, neighbors fainting, news vans arriving, and yet, amidst the chaos, the house stood quiet, a 2-story building with peeling paint, holding inside it a horror the world would never forget, because people could not decide. Was it mass suicide? Was it mass murder? Was it possession? Was it madness? Or was it something darker, something supernatural, that whispered to them until they obeyed? Even today, when I close my eyes, I see the bodies swaying slightly, tied to the iron grille, scarves around their necks, like puppets waiting for a master, and I feel the weight of their silence. Because silence is what they left behind, silence and questions no one has answered. The investigators said the diaries stretched back over 10 years, detailing instructions, punishments, even the number of glasses to use, the way to stand during prayers. The voices they believed came from their father guiding them step by step, and this was not sudden. It was prepared, repeated, rehearsed, like an endless rehearsal for one final act, and that act was death. Some say it was psychological, that Lalit suffered from trauma after his father's death, that he developed delusions which spread like fire into the minds of his family, and that group psychology made them believe him. Because when you trust someone fully, their madness becomes your truth. But others say no illness can explain the precision, the devotion, the calm in which the family walked into this ritual. Neighbors spoke of the family being happy, healthy, well-adjusted, running their business, planning marriages. Nothing suggested despair, nothing suggested depression, and that contradiction is what made it more terrifying. Because if such a family could surrender to something invisible, then maybe anyone could. I walked past that house weeks later, and the windows were still sealed, and the paint looked darker somehow. And even though the bodies were gone, the air felt heavy, as if their voices still hung there, tied, waiting to be heard, and I knew I could never forget it, never erase the sight of 11 people obeying something that lived only in their minds, or perhaps in the space between this world and the next. And when I think of horror, I do not think of monsters in the dark. I think of that family, standing in a line, blindfolded, gagged, hands tied, believing that what they were doing would save them, when in truth it ended them. And that is the most frightening thing of all, because the monster was belief itself. This is not folklore. This is not a ghost story. This is true. This is the Burari deaths of Delhi, India, in 2018, when 11 members of one family, men, women, children, and the elderly, all died in a ritual, guided by diaries, guided by voices they believed were real, guided by the promise of salvation, and what remains is a case that shook the world. Because no one can fully explain how belief can take life away so completely.